Hello and welcome to the Building Foundations podcast with me, Jess Reed. Today I'm joined by Lisa. Lisa, could you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Lisa Molloy. I'm a chartered quantity surveyor in the construction industry. I've been in the construction industry for circa 20 years now and worked on numerous schemes, from building roads and bridges, a little bit of rail work, to building megastructures like oil platforms. Went from being a chartered quantity surveyor to a commercial director, and now I'm self-employed, construction solutions and commercial services, and the author of Molly in Construction.
Fantastic. You've done a little spoiler there because I was going to come on to that later, but yeah, thank you very much for introducing yourself. The way that I tend to run this podcast and the way we like to start it for people listening is kind of go right back to the beginning, and then we'll sort of go along your career to the bit where you're doing what you're doing today, and then we can talk about your book as well, because there's definitely something we want to unpack a bit. So for anybody listening then, so you started your career within the quantity surveying side of things. How did that come about? So what made you think about that as a career choice?
So when I very first started out, there was a skill shortage in the construction industry, very, very similar to what we face now. The only difference now is that it's much worse than what it was then. I knew that I wanted a career in construction. I wasn't quite sure what I wanted that to be. However, everywhere you looked, everybody wanted the quantity surveyor. I looked into what that involved and decided that, yeah, I quite fancy getting involved in that. Ticked a few boxes. I quite like the logical kind of thinking. I like maths and things like that. So I then went and found a trainee QS post, applied for it and got it.
So just 1 in 1, was it?
I can't really remember. I think, yeah, I don't think I applied for many, but there was a skill shortage on, there was a lot of vacancies for QSs, and I actually got to start with Balfour Beatty, to be fair. So a tier 1 main contractor, very renowned for training people, very good at training people, a good solid tier 1, and that's who I started with.
I've got my sister-in-law works for them, but on the rail engineering side of things. So yeah, very, very good company. And so obviously you joined them, you kind of looked for a construction career, then thought about quantity surveying, joined them. How did you find it when you first joined? Was it a big challenge? Were they really supportive? How did it go?
So Balfour Beatty were very supportive in the respect that I worked 4 days a week, and I went to college 1 day a week with them, university to be fair, to get my degree. So they were very, very supportive from that point of view. Was it hard? Yes. It was very difficult to learn certain things like measurement. I struggled with having a visualization of 3D at that point in time. But I was very supported in the respect that at that point in time, there was a lot of people in the industry what I would call an old school. And Balfour Beatty had quite a lot of old school people who had been around in the industry for a long, long time. They always transferred their skill set.
You actually studied whilst working for them, didn't you?
Yes.
So I guess did they kind of fund that and put you through that and encourage that then?
Yes, fully funded. Yeah, one exists now. But that option's still around for people. You can go to university 1 day a week, gain a degree.
Yeah, definitely. How did you find the balancing of studying and working full time? Obviously, learning the role.
Experience, like real life experience.
Sorry, it paused then a little bit. Did you catch the question about with regards to your degree, balancing studying and working at the same time? How did you find that?
I think it was hard. And a lot of contractors, when you study part-time, when I did a part-time, they would give you extra days off if you needed time for exams, to cram and to study for exams, if you needed to go to uni for anything. So they were very, very supportive. But no doubt about it, it was hard. I mean, we were working 8 till 6 with Balfours 4 days a week. And it was sometimes difficult because you were learning something new. I much preferred to be at work than I did at university. I'm not a big academic, which is hence why I never ever went to university full time. It just didn't appeal to me at all. So I did much prefer to be at work than to be at university. But you know, I got in with a lot of support along the way.
No, that's fantastic. In terms of kind of what happened next for you, then you moved on from Balfour Beatty, didn't you? So how did things go from there? Did you finish your degree whilst with Balfour, or was it a bit later on? How was that?
No, I moved from Balfour's to what was then Molam, because Molam won the water framework. So I actually moved over to Molam with the water framework. I then went to work for Molam Civils for a while, and then Molam took over off Carillion. When another contractor came in and bought Molam out, there was a bit of unsettlement there, and I got offered an opportunity to go and work for Spencer's in the rail side of the industry. So I took that. It was back working with people that I worked with when I was at Balfour Beatty, so that was quite a nice place to be. So I went and picked up some rail experience for a couple of years, and then unfortunately Spencer's pulled out of the area, just purely because they didn't have any work in the area. So then I swiftly found myself back at Balfour Beatty, but a completely different arm of Balfour Beatty. I went to work for Balfour Beatty Management, and Balfour Beatty Management put me into Balfour Beatty Engineering Services. Balfour Beatty Engineering Services are an E&I arm of Balfour Beatty, so they're an electrical and instrumentation arm, and we've done all the electrical and instrumentation upgrades on power stations. You know, we've done a wind farm. I done my first oil platform with Balfour Beatty Engineering Services. So at that point, that was a huge turning point in my career, and probably is the best one that I ever had, because that was the exposure to major projects. And it was a small team that ran that out of the northeast. Their main office is in Glasgow and still remains to be there this day. But we were a small team running out of the northeast, and it was just a brilliant, absolutely brilliant team. Really good at what they've done. Great exposure, fantastic.
I saw on LinkedIn some of the projects you've been involved in. There was a big oil and gas one which looked phenomenal. Really, imagine that's a big point in your career as well. Something that was great to work on. Did you, when you first started your career, did you actually, obviously, you looked into quantity surveying and you applied for a quantity surveying role. Did you think about more of the kind of civil engineering and the engineering side as opposed to house builders or building commercial buildings and the building side of things? Did you actively choose, or did it just happen?
I actively wanted to pursue something in civil engineering. Out and out, I love engineering. I love major engineering. I didn't, unfortunately, want to be part of building. I had no, for whatever reason, I just didn't have any sort of thing that interested me in that side. Unfortunately, plenty of people do, but it just wasn't for me. I didn't want to be on the commercial build side. I always wanted to be in some kind of major engineering, roads, airports, tunnels, bridges, power stations. That absolutely just totally ticked the box and appealed to me.
Is there any advice you'd give to anybody who's not sure which route to go down, starting off in their career?
I think you've got to do a lot of research and understand what each arm offers, and probably look at yourself and try to understand what you really want out of the construction industry, and what makes you tick, and then follow that route. I've spent some time with the younger generation where I've offered some support and understanding the different arms, whether it be, do you work for a contractor, do you work for a consultancy, do you go into build, do you go into civils? And it's quite nice to have those conversations with people to understand what people's aspirations are. But I would certainly, you need to do some research.
Yeah, definitely. Do you think if perhaps they've done research and they're still undecided, do you think, because as a recruiter, sometimes what we see is that somebody might have only worked for main contractors and then perhaps a consultancy won't consider employing them, and it's kind of too late on to make that transition over. Do you think it's easier to make the transition from like a contractor to a consultancy, or the other way around, or do you just think that you do have to make that decision quite early on?
think you need to make the decision early on of where you want to be, but I do have experienced people where, you know, they've gone for a consultancy and then they've thought about crossing over to a contractor and vice versa. So that there is at a point in your career, you know, you can cross over. I've crossed over into many, many fields, you know, from civils into rail, in oiling, back into port works, back into civils, you know, and that there's a big change in that, although it's fundamentally all engineering works. But I do find, my personal opinion is that it's easier to cross over from a contractor to a consultant than it is potentially from a consultant to a contractor. That's just my personal opinion. But I do think in the construction industry, we certainly have a transferable skill set that should be explored, probably is a lot more.
Absolutely, and definitely with the skill shortage as well, it makes sense to consider people from different areas of the industry, doesn't it? So if we kind of look back then a bit as well, so you finished your degree, obviously you've gone through kind of the different moves you made and the sorts of projects you were then working on, and we'll go into them as well in a bit more detail, but you obviously became chartered, so you're chartered with the RICS, aren't you, but also the Institute of Civil Engineers. Which one did you do first, and how was that process?
The first one that I done was the RICS. I done that whilst I was with Balfour Beatty Engineering Services. I waited a little while until I was on the path where it would take a year for me to get chartered with them. And I started the process and sat my exam, and thank goodness passed. And it was thank goodness I passed, because I went to the interview 9 months pregnant, ready to deliver a baby with all of my baby bag in the car in case I went into labour in the interview. So yeah, it was quite good that I passed, because if I failed that interview, I would have had to start again, I think, because that's the way that it kind of works. So yeah, thank goodness I passed.
Oh gosh, yeah. So you were studying and getting ready for it then, whilst heavily pregnant. Did you find the process, was it daunting? How was it?
I think it wasn't so daunting. I just had to be very very organised. I had to call upon some RICS professionals that I knew that would then agree that I was a best fit person to become a chartered surveyor. And I was lucky enough that we'd had a project that was suitable for my critical analysis, which I had to do at the time and present to the RICS.
Sorry, my technology was cutting out then. Okay, so I mean, in terms then of your APC, is there any advice you'd give to anybody in the same situation that was kind of going through it, other than obviously preparing, as you sort of mentioned, reach out to people in your network? Is there any other key bits of advice?
No, I think that's probably the biggest thing, is plenty of support. Do not give up. No matter how hard it is, do not give up. You will get there eventually. You know, you don't have to, if you don't pass on your first, you can do a second sitting and a third and a fourth, and you know, take as many times as it needs to take to get you through that process. It may be that you need an additional skill set that you don't have yet. It will highlight all of that. So certainly you need to not give up. Keep with your network, approach RICS professionals for support, plenty of prep. And I would say that it has to be relevant to you. You know, all of the experience is relevant to you. Use a project that you've been heavily involved in, which is what the RICS wants, so that you can then explain exactly how you've helped on that project.
That's good advice. So you passed, which is great news. As you said, you was about to give birth. What happened next for you then? I assume obviously you gave birth to your child. Did you take a bit of time out, but still being at Balfour, or how did that go?
So I was at Balfour's and I was on maternity leave, and when my son was 6 months old, I took a call that asked if I would go to the Middle East to build the oil platform, and we all went. We mobilised, me, my husband, and our 6 month old child. Yeah, we all mobilised to the Middle East for 2 years.
It's a big change, isn't it? Were you happy about it? Do you think it was really like a good point in your career?
Oh, it was just like unbelievable. You know, it was like it's an experience that you can never buy. It was probably the best experience in my life. Was it scary, leaving everything behind and mobilizing in the Middle East with a 6-month-old baby? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But so worth it.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I guess the good thing is that the little one was obviously only 6 months old, whereas they weren't kind of at school, and it's a lot of upheaval. So that's good. But how, you know, obviously you moved over there then. How quick did it happen? Like, was the process quick moving over, or was it?
Yeah, I think from them asking me to go to me arriving was probably maybe within a month, you know, 4 weeks to a month, and I was there mobilised, straight on the ground, flew in on a Friday, went to work on the Saturday, straight in.
Fantastic. And in terms of how it differed to the UK construction industry then, that obviously you'd been heavily involved in, how was the key differences? So if somebody was considering working overseas, for example, how would you say the key differences were?
And the key difference for me, obviously, the heat was a big one. You know, I think we mobilised in the July time, so it's peak time, 50 degrees. It's not unusual for it to be 50 degrees during the day, and you're falling around an oil rig with the flame-proof overall on. It's hot. Construction in those conditions is difficult. Multicultural, certainly multicultural. You know, you're dealing with all different kinds of races, religions, and to me that was brilliant. Real eye-opener. Really opens your mind to how different people are, how different things are done. So yeah, a fantastic experience.
And so obviously that kind of came to an end then, and what happened next for you?
So just before it came to an end, I decided to have another child. So I was 5 months pregnant when I left the Middle East, crawling around an oil rig, 5 months pregnant, yeah.
In that heat as well. Don't envy that.
I came home, and funnily enough, when I came home, I went back to Balfour Beatty Engineering Services until a week before I had our second child. So I'd done some work for them, went off, had our youngest one, and then he was probably about the same, 6 months old, and I went back to Balfour Beatty Engineering Services just for a few days to do a little bit of work for them. And then when that came to an end, and I knew it was coming to an end, I got another offer to go back to the Middle East to construct a mirroring system for a FPSO, but this time that was in Abu Dhabi.
How was the trip to Abu Dhabi then? How was that in comparison to what you'd been doing?
Well, I think we kind of knew what we were letting ourselves in for. So me, my husband and 2 children, yeah, back on the plane out at Abu Dhabi. Very different in the respect that it's a mirroring system for an FPSO. I've never done a mirroring system for an FPSO before. Very, very different in structure. Very, very difficult in some respects to construct. Challenges on the project, absolutely. I was supposed to go for 6 months. We ended up being there a year. But again, it was just another a brilliant year and fantastic exposure. And I guess you don't really realise, but Abu Dhabi is different to Dubai, even though they absolutely neighbour each other. And again, opened up to all kinds of different cultures. It was a very multi team there, with the makeup of the team being European and you know, Middle East, Far East people there. So very, very different, but again, very, very good.
What do you think the kind of key things that you took personally and professionally, I guess, from working in different environments, different countries?
I think it opens your mind. I think it certainly opens your mind to the surprising thing for me was when you sit around a table and that table is made up of a number of different type of people, the brainstorming sessions that you have, or sessions that you have to overcome problems, are very, very different, because there's very, very different minds around the table. You know, there's very, very different cultures. That the absolute benefits of that is just fantastic.
think you would say then for anyone that's maybe considering doing projects overseas as well, it's just to go for it and give it a go?
Oh, absolutely. I would always say go for it. If you get an opportunity to take it with both hands and go, because you never know if that opportunity's ever come around again. It might never ever come around again. It might just be that the only time in life that you can do that is right now. So I was fortunate enough that I could go because my two children weren't of school age. It was very, very, very easy to mobilise babies to the Middle East, as it would be if I had to mobilise my children now who are of school age, you know. So yes, absolutely take that opportunity, because you just never know where it's going to lead to either. And absolutely. It will change you completely.
I think you came back, you know, a better surveyor. Sorry, did you catch that? Did you come back a better surveyor, do you think?
I don't know about a better surveyor. I just probably came back with a different mindset, I think. In exposure, you know, the exposure to major engineering, to scale of these structures, the type of people who you've been surrounded by, who have transferred knowledge that you potentially would never have ever been transferred to you. I mean, that's like, it's just priceless, that sort of experience.
Absolutely. And what happened next then? So you obviously stayed there a bit longer than you thought, and then you come back. What happened next?
So when I came back to the Northeast, for the last 5 years or so, been within SMEs within the Northeast of England, as commercial director, and then now I'm alone at Molloy, Construction Solutions Commercial Services. So eventually I decided to go alone, and I've only just recently done that, but I've had a nice time in the Northeast, being involved with different organisations like Seeker, and starting to really, really look at industry problems. That's been a massive thing that I've liked to explore, and had lots of conversations around that, and try to find solutions for some of the problems we face. So I've quite enjoyed that over the past few years now that I'm back home.
And if we probably go back a little bit of a step, and then we'll talk about what you're actually doing now. So you became chartered with the Civil Engineering Institute. So was that quite a simple process because you had the RICS, or was there still things you had to go through to get that?
Don't think you've got to go through for the CICS. I found it quite an all right process, you know. But yes, you still have to adhere to the CICS's rules and regulations and the ethos of that organisation.
Did you have to have like an interview or anything like that, with them, or what was for somebody that doesn't know?
I didn't have to have an interview with the CICS, but I do think that's as a direct result of the years of experience that I've got, demonstrated on my CV, and the fact that I'm chartered under another institution. But yes, there will be other people, if they're starting out in the career, very much like the RICS, they will have to have an interview, and their competencies will have to get agreed and signed off.
Yeah, because I work with a lot of surveyors on more like the building surveying side. I do some quantity surveying recruitment as well, but building surveying, building control surveying. So a lot of that is the RICS, or the Chartered Association of Building Engineers. And I know kind of once you've got one, you don't automatically get the next one, but it's a smoother process. You have to go through all of what you would have to starting out. So that's good. And do you think for somebody that is considering these different professional memberships, would you actually encourage them? Have you got quite a lot out of them?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'd encourage some chartered membership. I think it's a really good grounding. It sets a very professional tone. And from my institutions, absolutely. I'm very, very actively involved with both now. I sit on the ADI board for the CICES. I also sit on the dispute resolution board for the CICES. For the RICS, I sit on the conflict avoidance board. So yes, I am actively involved in those institutions and get a lot back from them.
I always hear lots of positive things about being involved with them, but you obviously you do see people that just don't want to go down those routes. But I think it's definitely something that you should encourage if you can. Absolutely. So if we kind of look at a bit of an overview before you started on your own, I know we've talked about a few of the projects you've been in, and I can probably guess some of your favourite projects. But what do you think if you had to say like the ultimate project you've been involved in that you've kind of learnt the most from, you've enjoyed the most, and has been the most satisfying if you looked back?
I think it has to be the oil, anything to do with the oil and gas. Obviously, the first time that I ever done a deck was actually in the UK. It was not in the Middle East. And that was probably, I always say it was the best and worst project that I was ever on, because it was very, very, very difficult. It's like anything when you first go onto a project and you've never constructed anything like that before. It is very, very difficult. It stretches you unbelievably. But the learning process that you go through, and when you come out the other end, you really, really have gained some valuable experience. But then, of course, that was it wasn't a huge deck, but it was quite big. And then that led on to Dubai, which was an absolutely huge structure. And then certainly the FPSO in Abu Dhabi, that was just a completely different type of structure, cylindrical, lots of problems with that construction. But the exposure, the learning curve, really, really fantastic.
I thought you would say sort of one of them projects, because they're the ones that I've seen on LinkedIn as well, which look fantastic. So you said that you worked for some consultancies, and obviously now you've set up, is it Molloy Construction?
Molloy, yeah.
Molloy, sorry. Molloy Construction. So what made you decide to go it alone?
I've wanted to do it for a while, but obviously there's been some sort of downturns with SMEs at the moment. So that was a big push for us to decide to go set up on my own. So here we are.
So how long have you been out on your own now then, and how's it going?
Only since February this year.
Okay, so just a couple of months then, if sort of that. But how's it gone, and what's the kind of learning curve been setting up on your own?
It's gone okay. It's different. It's different being on your own. Sometimes it can be lonely being on your own, a team of people, there's always lots of chatter and lots of noise. When you're on your own, it's very, very different. But also equally the same, you get a chance to do your own thing, you get a chance to manage things how you want to manage them, you get a chance to be involved in things that you want to be involved in. So equally, it's time just to try something else, I think.
So if you had to kind of summarise then the services that you're offering and the types of work that you've maybe already got involved in or intend to get involved in, how would you describe it?
So any sort of commercial support for SMEs, whether it be putting systems and procedures in place, doing some restructure, looking at how we can make the bottom line better than what it already is, mentoring commercial staff, especially the younger ones that's coming through, offering them support and training and advice, anything that's commercial. Looking at disputes, if you've got a job that is particularly challenging at the moment, or that there's a problem on there but you don't quite know what it is, I've got lots and lots of experience with that.
Fantastic. And are you covering just the Northeast, or are you UK wide, or?
Northeast for now.
Northeast for now. Take over the rest of the UK soon. Do you I mean, in terms of your plans then, I guess, for your business as well, are you planning on kind of it, just being you and offering those consultancy services, or do you ultimately, I know it's early days, but do you want to kind of grow a team? How are you?
I think it would be nice to grow a team, but I think we have to see how it pans out over the next few years.
The industry's kind of handled the pandemic quite well anyway, but it's definitely improving too, I think, isn't it? So fingers crossed, be good moving forwards. So I think we kind of covered then your kind of career to date in a bit of a nutshell. Obviously, there's so much experience there that we could talk about it forever, but I just wanted to kind of go over it. So the other thing then is that obviously the reason I reached out to your LinkedIn is I came across your profile because you released your own book. So could you tell anybody listening a bit about that and, you know, what it's called and where they can find it and what it's about and why?
So I wrote a book called Molly in Construction. It's specifically written and designed to try and open the minds of children into the world of construction. Why did I feel a need to write a book? I've been exploring the skill shortage probably for the past 2 to 3 years now. Sat in on many discussions where we've talked about, you know, the construction industry as a whole is absolutely facing a pandemic when it comes to a skill shortage. It's getting worse as time goes on, and there's lots of reasons for that. But one big reason is we don't have youngsters coming through into the industry, and there's a lot of people out in the industry, and absolutely hats off to them, that do some really, really good work where they're going to schools. But I looked at how many people, you know, were going into schools, and look at how many schools there are across the whole of the UK. And my concern being that we can't target everybody. There's a huge target on secondary schools, and I totally understand that they are the next people that will come through into the industry. But whilst we target secondary schools, we still have a fight going on with primary schools, because if we are not going into primary schools, capabilities or the people available to do that, it's almost like a generation of people that have to try and find out about an industry on their own. Then I would turn up at the school gates for a lot of people to say, "Oh, why were you in the Middle East? Did you go there for your husband's job?" And I was like, "No, I was there for my job." And they were like, the shock horror of like, "Oh, well, what do you do?" And then when I'd said, you know, I'm a QS, what does the QS do? And it then became apparent that people just didn't understand what I did for a living. They didn't understand the construction industry at all. And they would ask me questions of, how can I get my children in the construction industry? You know, what can they do? How did you know how to get into it? How did you have your degree fully funded? Especially, how can I get my daughter into the industry was like a very, very common theme. I then also got a lot of people that said, "Your children don't see any problem with you being in the construction industry," which my response was, of course not, it's all they've ever known. And I taught them every evening about what I've done during the day, and showed them projects. You know, they've been to a building site with me, they've seen things. But the problem is, unless we get parents, you know, to talk to their children about the industry, or get more people into the industry, that landscape will never change. That then got me thinking about, how can we get into the heads of children and educate them about the industry at primary school age, and in turn hopefully try and educate the parents as to careers that's available to the children. And I think we need a product. We need like a product that can get out there like en masse, that it's going to hit hopefully thousands of people. And the only product that I would think that would be effective would be a story, because it is twofold in the respect that it enables people to go into schools on STEM days, which I've done recently, to read the storybook to the children and talk them about construction. It then enables parents to sit down with their children on an evening before bed and do story time. It then educates the parent and the child on the industry. And also, it gives construction workers an opportunity to sit down with their children and talk through the book and say, "This is what I do every day whilst you're at school. This is me."
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's fantastic. I think when I saw it, because on some of these podcast episodes, we've talked with some of the other guests, we've talked about how can we get more people into the industry, and how can we get more, you know, women into the industry as well, but just people in general too, because we need to massively improve on, you know, diversity, inclusion, but also just on the number of people kind of coming in and getting trained up. So we kind of mentioned things like that, and then I saw your post and I thought that, yeah, that's literally the sort of thing that was needed. I think the next thing is for somebody to make it into kind of an animated cartoon or something for children. I think that, yeah, because I think it's such a fantastic idea, and I'm going to order a copy as well for my children, because they don't know about the industry. To be fair, my eldest does sometimes talk about being a builder, but that kind of, to me, that kind of reiterates what I knew growing up too. The only thing I thought that you could do in the construction industry was be like a bricklayer, labourer, trades, those sorts of roles, which obviously are great careers too, but there's so much more to the industry and so many different avenues you can go down. It's almost like, how do we teach people about that? And I think you've nailed it there, because parents need to be educated too, don't they? Absolutely. How's the launch gone then? Is it being kind of received well?
Oh yeah, absolutely amazing. I'm pretty overwhelmed with the response that I've had, and very grateful that absolutely everybody who has shared it, liked it, commented, bought a copy. That's just fantastic, because what we really want to do is get the word out, to children and parents. So anybody that can lend some support in doing that on the way, that's fantastic, and I think you're absolutely right. I think part of what I wanted to do was to stop children thinking that building is a brick wall and a bricklayer, although that is part of it, and a cement mixer and a dump truck, because that's really the only things I think that a lot of children visualize. And that became apparent when I went into a STEM day at a school. The day after the book came out, I went into school from 8:30 till 2:30 and taught them about construction all day. And all that they thought about when I went in at it, house building. That was all they had in their head. Not even roads, bridges, tunnels, nothing like that. Rail, airports. When I started to ask them, how do you go on holiday? And, how do you travel to London? Could you go in a car? Could you go on a train? Or Scotland, and they never thought about it at all. All that they could think about was house building. And I would like us to try and come away from that to look at how exciting it can be for them to be in a world where you can, change the landscape, change somebody's life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's just kind of evident everywhere, I think, because I don't, as a mum and with friends that are also mums, I don't think any of our children, girls or boys, really think anything other than, the dumper trucks they play with when they're little. I mean, when I was growing up, there was the cartoon, I think it was Bob the Builder, which is, again, it's just about being a builder, and it's male orientated, which, yeah, great. Obviously, we need people doing that role as well. But how do we, I know in terms of your book, so I think if I'm right from what I've read so far without having a copy, it kind of goes through the different roles that there are on a construction site. Is that right?
It does. So Molly is the main character, and she's a quantity surveyor, obviously.
Yeah, of course.
And then it's about how they build a structure, and it's about how they build this structure, but along the way she meets everybody in the site team, and what does the site team look like, and who is in the site team, and what is their job title, and then in turn for their job title, what is their job description. So, and there is a theme, like a thread that runs through the story, that it's Molly's a quantity surveyor. What's a quantity surveyor, I hear you ask? And then it's, what's an engineer, I hear you ask? What's a planner? What's a planner, I hear you ask? And it's, and then we can start to explore all of those different sort of professions.
Fantastic. I think that's a really good idea, because you're not just opening up their eyes to one particular role, which is quantity surveying, but you're opening up their eyes to other different career routes. I mean, there's so many. It'd be hard to cover that in one book, but maybe you can do a sequel and a series of books.
I agree, that's the problem. So I've probably chose a few professions that nobody knows about, to try and open their minds. But you are absolutely right, it just touches the surface on opportunities that are available to children.
There is so many. Do you, I mean, in terms of the age range for this book, have you got a target age in mind? Is it, young children?
when I wrote it, it was aimed at primary school children, so anywhere from 5 to say 10, because I think a 5-year-old will take some elements of it that will be different to what a 10-year-old takes. So it will appeal to both. But I'd also even say I've been asked, does it sort of touch on secondary school? You might have a secondary school child that thinks it's too childlike, but it will certainly open their mind to a profession and to a job title in the construction industry. So certainly the early years of secondary school, I would still say have a go.
And I guess, if they've got younger siblings as well and it's being read to them and they're kind of listening in, because I know our two are different ages, but they listen at the same story time. So it's a really good idea. Do you think if a child, so I know you said it kind of touches probably early stages of secondary school, do you think that there's more that could be done maybe once you start to get to those ages? Have you got any other sort of suggestions of things that we could do to overcome, maybe like 11 to 16? I know obviously we've got some people kind of going into schools, but maybe even earlier, maybe 11 to 13, 14, something we could do with them.
I definitely think we need some engagement at secondary school level. We need to sort of educate teachers somehow on what's available in the construction industry, and parents, because they just don't know. Teachers have no idea in some respects of the type of job roles that's available. So if they don't have an idea, how can they then turn sort of tell the children or help the children to understand? So we definitely need to do more. I might come up with something.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you come up with a great idea so far, so I'm sure you can think of something else. But you're right, because when you're at school at that level, I mean, if I go back to, and I think it's probably similar now, but it's probably changed a lot as well. But like we had things like woodwork and DT, so design technology, and we was doing like a lot of woodwork, which obviously fits in well with like carpentry roles. But surely there's some kind of subject that could be incorporated into school that covers something more relevant to wider roles. Don't know what, but I mean, I know maths obviously comes into play in things like quantity surveying, but yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? But you're right, something definitely needs to be done. Maybe a book can be targeted at their ages too.
I mean, there's a huge push on STEM at the moment, and I do know that there's a lot of contractors will go into secondary school, do career evenings and things like that, and absolutely hats off to them guys, for taking the time out to do that. It's just, but we really need to do something like en masse, and there's lots of sort of tools out there like Go Construct that'll help people look at what's available to them. It's just the communication on getting that out to people.
Absolutely. And I think, as things hopefully within that improve and more word gets out there, and hopefully, your book will make changes as well. I'm sure it will. There is other ways, I guess, we can kind of help with that skill shortage too, isn't there? Maybe, perhaps, I mean, within sort of building surveying, residential surveying, there's a few different pathways that people that have gone down other career options, so maybe they didn't know anything about property at that point, have then kind of moved into it. So I think more needs to be done at that level as well. Do you think?
Yeah, and I do know people who've gone off and done a degree, like a geography degree or a law degree, and then actually transferred over to the construction industry and done a conversion degree. I know quite a few people that's done that as well. So, you don't always, sometimes that's how life pans out, that you think you're going to do one and then something else crops up and you completely change your mind, and that's fine. So it is about absolutely, educating people that there's an option there for them.
Absolutely. I mean, I talk about this a lot, but within residential surveying, for example, there's a SAVA course which people can go down, and they don't even have to have any qualification, like you said before, relevant to property industry, relevant to surveying, but they can study it alongside working full time in whatever career they're already in. And then when they're qualified, they're actually automatically associate RICS, which...
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, I followed that for quite a while, and I see more and more people going through it, but I think that's great for residential surveying, but I think other kind of disciplines need those sorts of things as well. It's just how we'd go, how you kind of go about getting them started.
And it's just the fact that, the construction industry is so diverse in the respect that not everybody is going to want to go and off and get a degree. And that's absolutely fine. There's lots and lots of options like NVQs, HNCs, HNDs. They can lead on to a degree, but if you don't want to do a degree, you can stop at HNC, you can stop at HND, you can do an NVQ. You don't have to be a typical QS or an engineer. There's lots of trades open, like joiners, plumbers, electricians, plasterers, bricklayers. All of those trades are also facing a skill shortage. So if you have a female, for example, who has a particular interest in woodwork or joinery, then there's no reason why that person can't then become a joiner on site.
Absolutely. So it's kind of related to this skill shortage, but also gets to diversity and inclusion as well. So one of the topics that I see a lot, and I was in a clubhouse room yesterday about it as well, is women in construction and property. Do you think there's additional things so we've talked about some really great things to get more people into the industry. Do you think there's anything additional we could do to get more women into the industry?
Yes. I think we've definitely got to try and do some work with younger girls to make them think that it's okay. It's not a male job anymore. When I went into the school on Friday, they were just absolutely shocked that I was on a building site, and I took along my bag of kit, hard hat, boots, flame-proof overalls, high vis, put them on, and the kids were like, "You just look so different." And I was like, yeah, but you didn't stereotypically think that this is what I would wear or this is what I would do. And we have to try and open the mind to that it's okay to be that person. We're definitely getting more women. I see more women now than when I started, but still not enough. Without a doubt, not enough.
No, definitely not enough. I think I read somewhere that the percentage of women on construction sites is like 1% or 2% or something really small. So yeah, definitely more needs to be done. But I do think a lot of it goes back to that early education piece, kind of like you're saying there. That early education piece will in turn bring more people into the industry, which in turn will bring more women into the industry. But it's not going to happen overnight, is it? But it's
not. But then I also think the industry has to work really, really hard. That once you have women in the industry, then we need to retain them.
Okay, yes, yeah.
I think that needs to be addressed. We've got to start retaining women in the industry.
Why do you think that perhaps we don't retain them as well as we should? I
think flexibility. There's a lot of women where maybe childcare options fall to them. And sometimes we don't always offer that level of flexibility in the industry, and we've got to try and change that mindset. We should offer flexibility for not only mums but dads as well, and that has to change somehow. I think they need to be a little bit supported where they're not so much on the outside. They need to probably be part of the inside a lot more. They need to potentially stop working 10 times harder to try and get their voice heard. We need to be able to give them a voice. For sure, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. I think I've seen quite a few kind of conversations going on places, for example, like LinkedIn and with some of my network, where we need to see more women in sort of senior positions as well, because then it allows people coming into it who are maybe a female to think, look, I can get to there. Look, there's somebody great and doing a great job up there amongst men, and they're fully supported. And I think we need to have some more role models like that, don't we?
Absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt.
If we don't look at necessarily at the skill shortage, do you think there's any other issues that kind of the construction industry might face over the next 5 or so years? Is there anything else?
I think we've potentially got a big mental health issue at the moment. I think that's absolutely been impacted with COVID as well, but I think it's always been something that's there in the background. I think we need to absolutely up our game in looking at that and starting to look inside the box. It's certainly there. very much we need to be supportive. There's lots of companies doing some great initiatives at the moment. We just need to absolutely make it okay to have a conversation.
Absolutely, I agree. That's I mean, that's something you see everywhere at the moment as well, and it's such an important subject that I think things, though, like you mentioned about sort of flexibility for parents and even things like that, which you might not necessarily align to mental health, actually will play a role. What do you think, what else do you think that the industry could do to combat some of this, you know, the issues surrounding mental health and people becoming obviously unwell with it?
I think we've got to change our image slightly. I definitely think we need an image overhaul, and that's twofold, because that's part of the reason why we have a skill shortage, is to do with our image. You know, we need to be seen as not so much of a bust and boom kind of industry, not so much of a sort of, you know, resilient, dirty, hard type of industry. Times are changing, we are changing, and we need to change our image and how we behave with that. Certainly, I think the mental health side of it, we need to just stop having that hard, really sort of hard, resilient kind of industry. We are very resilient people in the construction industry, but we need to make it okay to, as they say, okay not to be okay, okay to have that conversation. You know, if somebody's struggling at some point in time, we work in a very, very pressurized environment. We are changing the landscape. That's often to strict costs and to strict times. So it's okay at some point in time to feel pressure of that. And just because you feel the pressure of that at one point doesn't mean that it will be like that forever. You know, at that point you may need a little bit of additional help, and that's okay. We need for that to be okay, and us to be able to have that conversation and provide that support and move on from it.
Yeah, definitely. There's that stigma, isn't there? And I mean, I've kind of suffered with anxiety for quite a long time, and I know that, so kind of talking about it, and when I was employed for other people, like, they were supportive, but I kind of felt like I shouldn't talk about it because they're going to think then that I can't do my job, or that the issue is because I've got targets to meet and I'm struggling because, you know, my mental health is down. They're going to think, well, maybe recruitment's not for you then, because it's always going to be a targeted environment. But you're right, it sometimes can just be a period of time where it's particularly bad and you just need a little bit of support or a little bit of downtime. So yeah, you're absolutely right. But I think that's a whole big conversation too, isn't it? Mental health and how we can improve that. Do you think there's any other sort of issues or anything else that we might face over the coming years that might impact us?
Disputes. I get involved with a lot of disputes and trying to avoid disputes and working to try and get people to work together, as opposed to going down the route of you know, legal route like an adjudication. And that is a lot about us coming together and trying to work together and overcome our issues. So that's going to be absolutely paramount in the next few years ahead.
I guess that's something that you're probably going to be getting involved in as well.
Yeah, I would think so.
And what about opportunities then? So obviously we've got the opportunity to do better mental health wise, and the opportunity to kind of bridge improve the skill shortage. I don't think it's going to happen in the next sort of coming years. It's going to be a long process, but is there anything else that you think we kind of got an opportunity to do better or be better with?
I think we've absolutely got an opportunity to change the industry and to grow, and like I say, change that image of us, to get that word out that, you know, you look at construction, sometimes I feel as though it's quite a forgotten thing. People don't realise that every single day we're changing somebody's life. You know what I mean? If you wake up in the morning from running the tap to be able to fill the kettle, to brushing your teeth, to getting in your car and going to work, at some point in time, at every single stage of your morning routine, civil engineering is having an effect on you, or construction at some point is having an effect on you. You know, you couldn't brush your teeth if somebody hadn't have piped the house up and connected that to a sewage treatment plant, and you know, if somebody hadn't built the house in the first place. So we certainly play a huge role in people's lives, and that's potentially quite forgotten sometimes, I think. You know, especially during the pandemic, we were the one industry that absolutely carried on regardless. We adhered to COVID restrictions, obviously, and took all of that on board. But every single day, a construction worker was out there, whether it was doing reactive works, whether it was doing, maintenance, critical works, infrastructure. I mean, the Nightingale hospitals, who built the Nightingale hospitals? So we played an absolutely integral role in that. But yet, of all of the things that happened during that COVID period, I sometimes think we were just like ever so slightly forgotten in that process.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because obviously, NHS workers, for example, and care workers were absolutely praised, and so they should be. But you're right. I guess a lot of the things that happened, and the good things that happened, like the building of the hospital in order to help combat this pandemic we were going through, that wouldn't have happened if we didn't have construction workers. And still going to sites and things, you kind of putting yourself at risk going to site and continuing on with what you're doing. I know you had hearing and everything like that, but yeah, I think you're right, it definitely should have been more praise, but you don't really hear that, do you?
And I think at that point in time, when people were going to site and building things, they'll have had their own worries about their own families, about their children, about their relatives, about what did the future look like. Okay, we're out constructing now. Are we still going to be constructing in a year's time or 6 months' time? What does our industry look like? Are we going to suffer? People are losing jobs. They still had all of those anxieties and fears, but went out every day and built something.
In the last recession, I know we've had a bit of a recession, and in the last recession, construction was massively impacted. So naturally, the minute we start to look at the economy and think that things are obviously not going very well due to the pandemic, people are going to worry, aren't they, that is it going to happen again? And there was companies that unfortunately did let people go. So you're right, everyone in the in the UK and in the world naturally was very worried, but to still keep going to site and putting yourself at risk every day to continue these works and keep the economy moving as much as possible should be commended. So yeah, I think you're right. So definitely aspects that can be altered and change the image of the industry as a whole. And as we've said, it's not going to happen overnight, but people like you who obviously are trying to make a difference, if we just have lots of people like you doing it, eventually we'll kind of get to where we need to be, I think. So just to kind of finish up then, what does the future look like for you, do you think? And if anybody wants to reach out to you or grab a copy of your book, how do they do
that? What does the future look like? I think the future is what we make it. We have to, we have to strive to do whatever we want to do, to never give up on your dreams, to keep going for it. So all of those people that want to get into the construction industry, absolutely go for it. Just know what the future is going to hold or what you're going to be built. That we have harness all that positivity that we have and absolutely drive the industry forward is my view for what does the future hold. Molloy Construction is available at Waterstones, Amazon. It's available direct through Pegasus Publishers. If anybody wants to reach out to me, yes, I'm absolutely on all social media networks now, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook. Yeah, I'm fine for people to reach out. If I might be a little bit busy from time to time, but if I can connect and help anybody, then yes, absolutely, I certainly will try.
Fantastic. That was I was feeling a lot more motivated after that speech as well. So thanks for that. And what I'll do for anybody listening is I will include like a link to your LinkedIn and also where they can purchase the book from as well when this episode goes out. But yeah, I mean that's everything. Is there anything additional you'd like to talk about that you think people might want to hear, or do you think we've kind of covered?
No, I think you've covered it very well, and thanks for the invite today to come along. It's been fun.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much for actually agreeing as well. I know you're busy, but yeah, been really good to talk to you.